The map on the wall of the Tactical Operations Center showed every patrol route, every checkpoint, every known threat in the region surrounding Forward Operating Base Phoenix. Captain Sarah Mitchell studied it for 3 hours on her first night at the base. She traced the lines with her finger, noting the patterns, the repetitions, the predictable rhythms of military routine. And she saw what no one else had seen. The insurgents weren't random. They were herding the patrols into predictable paths. She called a meeting with her platoon leaders at 0800 the next morning. 4 officers filed into the briefing room: Lieutenant Kyle Henderson, Lieutenant James Park, Lieutenant Maria Sanchez, and Lieutenant Derek Cole. All of them had combat experience. All of them had been at FOB Phoenix longer than she had. And none of them wanted her there. Sarah stood at the front of the room, pointer in hand, facing the map. "Gentlemen," Lieutenant Sanchez, "thank you for coming. I've reviewed our patrol patterns for the last 6 months, and I see a problem." Henderson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He was 34, a West Point graduate with 2 combat tours under his belt. He didn't hide his skepticism. "What kind of problem?" Sarah pointed to the map. "We are running the same routes on a predictable schedule. Alpha Platoon sweeps north every Monday and Thursday. Bravo takes the eastern corridor on Tuesday and Friday. Charlie holds the southern perimeter on a rotating 48-hour cycle. The enemy knows this. They are avoiding us, not engaging us, because they are mapping our movements." Park, a quiet officer who rarely spoke, finally did. "That's the point. We've pushed them out of the area. No contact means success." "No contact means they're planning something bigger," Sarah replied. "Look at the IED finds from the last 3 months. They are not on our patrol routes. They're around them. They're creating a perimeter outside our perimeter." Sanchez frowned, leaning forward to study the map. For a moment, Sarah thought she might have one ally. But Henderson spoke first. "With all due respect, we've been running these routes for 6 months. They work. We haven't lost a single soldier to enemy contact in 73 days. That's a win." Sarah turned to face him. "It's a win until it's not." The room went cold. Henderson's jaw tightened. The other platoon leaders exchanged glances. From the back corner of the room, a voice cut through the tension. Maybe you should get some experience here before changing everything." Staff Sergeant Marco Diaz stood near the door, arms crossed, his expression hard. He wasn't part of the briefing, but he'd walked in halfway through and stayed. His presence was a deliberate challenge. Sarah met his gaze. "Thank you for your input, Staff Sergeant. This briefing is for officers only." Diaz didn't move. "Just saying what everyone's thinking." Henderson didn't defend her. Neither did the others. The silence was an endorsement. Sarah took a slow breath. She could escalate this. Pull rank. Make it an issue of discipline. But she'd learned long ago that forcing respect only breeds resentment. "Understood," she said quietly. She closed her notebook. Meeting dismissed. The officers filed out without a word. Diaz followed them, a faint smirk on his face. Sarah stood alone in the briefing room, staring at the map. She'd been right. She knew she was right. But no one wanted to listen. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Military and Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Captain Sarah Mitchell was 29 years old, a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy at West Point, with a degree in civil engineering and a specialty in explosive ordnance disposal. She'd served 1 tour in Iraq, where she defused 37 IEDs and earned a Bronze Star. She'd been promoted to captain ahead of schedule and assigned to command Alpha Company at FOB Phoenix as part of a battalion rotation. On paper, she was qualified. In reality, she was resented. The men, and it was mostly men, saw her as a diversity hire. A box the army needed to check. She was young, she was a woman, and she'd never commanded troops in sustained combat. To them, she was an outsider who didn't understand their world. They made sure she knew it. In the chow hall, officers would finish their meals and leave when she sat down. During formation, soldiers would come to attention slowly, reluctantly, testing her authority. When she gave orders, they were followed, but only after a pause, a glance at Staff Sergeant Diaz or Lieutenant Henderson for silent confirmation. No one saluted her unless absolutely required. No one sought her advice. No one asked her opinion. Sarah absorbed it all in silence. She didn't complain. She didn't demand respect. She just worked. Every night, she stayed late in the Tactical Operations Center, studying maps, reviewing intelligence reports, analyzing patterns. She knew the terrain better than anyone on the base. She knew the enemy's tactics. She knew the gaps in their defenses. But no one asked her what she saw. The contrast between Sarah and her subordinates was stark. They were loud, confident, certain of their experience. She was quiet, methodical, careful. They bonded over jokes and shared deployments. She kept to herself, always reading, always preparing. They looked like warriors, broad-shouldered, weathered, scarred. She looked like she belonged in a classroom, not a combat zone. And they never let her forget it. 3 days after the briefing, Sarah sat alone in her quarters, reviewing supply manifests. A knock on the door interrupted her. "Come in." Lieutenant Sanchez stepped inside, her expression cautious. "Oh, do you have a minute?" Sarah gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Sanchez hesitated. "I've been thinking about what you said. About the patrol routes." Sarah set down her pen. "And? I think you might be right. I went back through the intel reports. The IED placements, they are not random. They are staged around our routes, not on them. It's like they're preparing for something." For the first time since arriving at FOB Phoenix, Sarah felt a flicker of validation. "What do you think they're preparing for?" "A breach," Sanchez said quietly. "If they hit us directly, bypass the patrols entirely, they could cause serious damage before we respond." Sarah nodded. "That's what I'm afraid of." "Have you taken this to the colonel?" "Not yet. I wanted more evidence first." Sanchez looked down at her hands. I don't think Henderson or the others will support you. They've already made up their minds." "I know. So what are you going to do?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "I'm going to be ready. And when it happens, I'm going to prove them wrong." 2 days later, at 0347 hours, the base alarm shattered the night. The first explosion ripped through the eastern perimeter, tearing a hole in the wire. The second detonated near the motor pool, sending flames and shrapnel into the air. The third hit the communications tower, knocking out the base's primary radio system. Chaos erupted. Soldiers scrambled from their bunks, grabbing rifles, pulling on boots, shouting into the darkness. Gunfire crackled in the distance. Mortar rounds began falling inside the wire. In the Tactical Operations Center, Colonel Raymond Harding slammed his fist on the table. How the hell did they get this close? Lieutenant Henderson, disheveled and still pulling on his vest, stared at the map. "Sir, they bypassed all our patrols. They came in from the northwest, an area we don't cover." The colonel's face darkened. "Then why don't we cover it?" No one answered. Because the answer was standing in the back of the room, silent, waiting. Captain Sarah Mitchell stepped forward, her voice calm and steady. "Sir, I can handle this." The colonel turned to her. "Captain Mitchell, you've been here less than a week." "Yes, sir. But I know where the IEDs are." Henderson's head snapped around. "What?" Sarah walked to the map, picking up a marker. She drew 3 circles. "They planted charges here, here, and here. The explosions we just heard were breaches. But these," she tapped the circles, "are the real threats. Vehicle-borne IEDs positioned to collapse the main structures when we move personnel to respond." Harding stared at her. "How do you know this?" "Because it's what I would do, sir. They've been watching us for months. They know our response patterns. They hit the perimeter to pull us out, then they hit the core to maximize casualties." Henderson stepped forward. "Sir, with all due respect, this is speculation." "It's not speculation," Sarah interrupted. Her voice was quiet but absolute. "It's tactics. And if I'm wrong, we lose nothing. But if I'm right and we don't act, we lose everything." The colonel studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "What do you need?" 10 minutes, a trauma kit, and a clear path to the motor pool." "You're going alone?" "I'm EOD, sir. It's what I do." The colonel hesitated, then stepped aside. Go. Sarah grabbed a kit from the supply locker and moved toward the door. As she passed Henderson, she stopped. Lieutenant, I need you to coordinate the defensive perimeter. Keep them focused on the breach. Don't let anyone near the motor pool until I give the all clear. Henderson's pride warred with his training. Finally, he nodded. Yes, Sarah sprinted into the night. The base was lit by fires and flares. Smoke choked the air. Gunfire snapped from the perimeter. She ran low, staying in the shadows, moving toward the motor pool. The first IED was a white pickup truck, parked 20 meters from the fuel depot. If it detonated, the entire motor pool would go up in flames. Sarah dropped to her knees beside the vehicle, pulling out her tools. Her hands moved with practiced precision. Wire cutters, multimeter, flashlight. She traced the wiring harness from the payload to the trigger mechanism. It was a pressure release switch. If the truck was moved or the door opened, it would detonate. She had no robot, no backup team. Just her hands and her training. She cut the first wire. Nothing. Second wire. Still stable. Third wire. The circuit sparked. Her heart stopped. But the charge didn't blow. She exhaled slowly and kept working. 8 minutes later, the first device was neutralized. She moved to the second, an IED buried near the command bunker. This one was harder. Remote detonated, hidden under loose dirt, waiting for a signal. Sarah dug carefully, clearing the soil, exposing the charge. She traced the receiver to its battery pack and severed the connection. 2 down. 1 to go. The third device was the most dangerous. It was inside the perimeter, near the barracks, disguised as a supply crate. If it went off, it would kill everyone in a 50-meter radius. Sarah approached slowly. The crate was wired with a motion sensor. Any vibration could trigger it. She knelt beside it, hands steady despite the gunfire and explosions around her. She opened the crate with surgical care, revealing the payload, 20 kilograms of military-grade explosives. The timer was already counting down. 47 seconds. She didn't panic. She just worked. Traced the wiring. Found the master circuit. Cut the failsafe. 30 seconds. Her hands moved faster. Bypassed the secondary trigger. Isolate the detonator. 15 seconds. She pulled the detonator free and hurled it away from the barracks. It detonated midair with a sharp crack, but the main payload remained inert. Sarah collapsed against the crate, breathing hard, her hands trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. Behind her, Staff Sergeant Diaz emerged from the shadows. He'd been watching the entire time, providing cover fire, keeping insurgents away from her position. He stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, deliberately, he came to attention and saluted. Sarah looked up at him, exhausted, covered in dirt and sweat. She returned the salute, her hand steady. By dawn, the attack had been repelled. Insurgents retreated into the hills. The base sustained damage but no casualties. Because the IEDs that should have killed dozens had been neutralized by a captain no one wanted to follow. In the Tactical Operations Center, Colonel Harding called an emergency briefing. Every officer and senior NCO attended. Sarah stood at the front of the room, still in her scorched uniform, her face streaked with soot. The colonel addressed the room. Last night, Captain Mitchell identified and neutralized 3 vehicle-borne IEDs that would have killed over 40 soldiers. She did it alone, under fire, with no backup. Because of her, everyone in this room is still breathing. He turned to Sarah. Captain, you saved this base. You earned every bit of respect you're about to receive. Lieutenant Henderson stepped forward. For the first time since Sarah had arrived, his expression was humble. He came to attention and raised his hand in a crisp salute. He said, his voice thick with emotion. I was wrong. You earned it. One by one, the other officers followed. Lieutenant Park, Lieutenant Sanchez, Lieutenant Cole, and then the NCOs. Staff Sergeant Diaz, platoon sergeants, squad leaders. The entire room stood and saluted. Sarah felt her throat tighten. She'd spent a week being invisible, dismissed, disrespected. And now, in this moment, she was finally seen. She returned the salute, her voice steady. Thank you. But the fight's not over. We've got work to do. In the days that followed, everything changed. Soldiers who had ignored her now sought her advice. Officers who had dismissed her tactics now studied them. When she walked through the base, soldiers saluted without hesitation, without resentment. But Sarah didn't gloat. She didn't remind anyone of the briefing they dismissed. She just kept working. Because respect, once earned, isn't maintained by words. It's maintained by action. A week after the attack, Henderson approached her in the chow hall. This time, when she sat down, he didn't leave. He sat across from her. I owe you an apology. I let my pride get in the way of listening to someone who knew better. Sarah looked at him. You're a good officer, Henderson. You just needed to see that experience isn't the only thing that matters. Sometimes, a fresh perspective saves lives. Henderson nodded. Lesson learned. Staff Sergeant Diaz stopped by her table as well. He set his tray down and stood at attention. Permission to join you, Sarah smiled. Granted, Staff Sergeant. Sit. He sat, and for the first time, they talked. Not as adversaries. As soldiers. Moral of the story, respect isn't given. It's earned. And true leadership isn't about demanding authority. It's about proving, through action, that you deserve to be followed. If this story moved you, don't forget to show your support. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more military and veteran stories. We bring you true tales of courage, sacrifice, and honor. Stories that remind us that courage doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it quietly saves lives. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never forget the heroes among us.